The thing I love most about this rivalry, everybody's wrong until the result comes in.
Let's go.
They always say, throw out the records when it comes to this rivalry. On that day, you have to prove that you're the better team in the state of Michigan.
I don't get why both teams can't be great at the same time. It doesn't always have to be one or the other.
I love you, man, but you're an idiot. A Michigan State podcast. And here's your hosts, Justin Rose and Michael Spath.
Don't laugh. You're supposed to open the show today. Got to get there, Michael. Come on, Michael. I'm just doing my Superman.
I thought
doing my Superman.
I thought you were doing like I love you. I thought that was like your I love you, man.
No.
Oh, that was your
It is.
Superman.
And listen, man, we are 48 hours away.
Maybe less depending on when someone's listening to this podcast.
Depending on, and maybe the game could already be over and somebody's listening to this. And I want to let them know. I'm fired up. You know,
I'm glad to see that.
fired
I'm glad
up.
to hear that. I'm glad to see it because this
I
was
wasn't
a week.
fired up.
This was a week earlier. The first podcast, we were kind of like ho-humming a little bit,
Dude.
but I agree. My wife has been flying the Michigan State flag, but maybe tomorrow morning she'll say to me, "Hey, can we go put the green and white out there, along with the maize and blue?"
All right.
And just
So look, quick story time. Picked up Michael this morning because he needed a ride to the podcast because the car was in the shop. So I'm happy to do it. We get in the car. And this is what every Spartan needs to do. On Saturday morning or Saturday when you need to pick me up, go to Spotify or your favorite, wherever you listen to this podcast, and you type in the Michigan State University fight song, and you blare that baby in your car because we drove here, and this guy was silent. He's like, I can't. I said, my car, my audio.
that's not what I said. I said, you know how many times I've heard this fight song since I've been married?
It's a better story when you didn't even look at me and you hated my guts. So I'm going to say it that way.
Look, I don't know what my wife has in store for me tomorrow. She seems to pull a little bit of pranks here and there. We just did an article with M Live.
Mhm.
Shout out to Sam Dodge from M Live.
Yes.
And I mentioned how one year my wife's like, "Hey, I made you pancakes." And I'm like, "Wow, this is the best wife ever." And I go out and there's like a little Sparty S in the middle of the pancakes. It's green. I'm like, "What the fuck is this?" Right? Like
Delicious pancakes.
And I'm a big I was a big milk drinker at one point, and she's like, "Oh, I have a glass of milk for you too," and she like serves and it's green milk, and I'm like, "Come on, what are you doing here?" She's hid my Michigan flag before. She's woken me up on game day with like Michigan State fight song, and I give it back, and I'll certainly play the Michigan fight song. When our son, before we had two kids, she came downstairs and John was dressed all in Michigan stuff the day of the game, and she was like, "No. She's like, we need to put him in a Michigan shirt and a Michigan State." I'm like, nope, he's a Wolverine today. So we do all kinds of fun stuff like that, and that's the genesis of how this podcast came to be, right?
Right.
So,
No, and Sam again from M Live. If you haven't checked out the article, it's a fun article. We got to take some fun pictures together that hopefully we'll be able to use with the podcast here moving forward. But this week is so fun, and we have two guests today that I think you guys are really going to enjoy. Brian Lewerke, former Michigan State quarterback, and
I want to welcome to the podcast Jehu Chesson, wide receiver for Michigan. Played for the Wolverines from 2013 to 2016. Has a great victory over Michigan State in 2016. We'll get into that. But Jehu, thank you very much for joining us on he doesn't even know the name of the podcast, the I Love You, But You're an Idiot podcast, where we talk about all things Michigan State. So thank you very much, man.
Gotcha. Of course. No, pleasure to be here, gentlemen.
Jehu, take us back. So, your early part of your career is the Brady Hoke era. And then Jim Harbaugh comes in. And one of the things that Jim Harbaugh was brought to the University of Michigan to do was, in the eyes of Michigan fans, restore the proper pecking order in the Michigan State rivalry. Justin doesn't like to hear that, but that's what he was brought here for.
So long enough.
Make things right.
Yeah. So take us through the early years of Jim Harbaugh and the mentality of like, here is Michigan State, who has dominated the Wolverines for about a decade. And how did you, what type of attitude was there to try to get this back to the way it was?
Yeah, so obviously, right, like, Coach Harbaugh needs no introduction, but when we found out he was coming to Ann Arbor, I actually remember it was if you guys remember, Jim Hackett was the interim AD, right? And so I'll give you a quick story about that I think people will appreciate. So Jim Hackett had us, we're in a meeting room, and he was, telling us and walking us through how he, selected the new head coach for the University of Michigan, right? And so he had this thing called like the swim lane theory. I don't know if have you guys heard this story?
No,
Okay,
heard it.
well, you're about to be enlightened. So check it out. So he had this thing called the swim lane theory, right? And he would make these, these Olympic swim lanes, right? Draw them on the whiteboard, and he would write down qualities about each, interviewee that they were looking at. And so he would like put up in the meeting room, he was just like putting up fake names. He's like, well, if I had a guy named Tom, Joe, and then he wrote Jim, right? And everybody in the meeting room was like, oh, Jim Harbaugh. And then he was like, no, not Jim Harbaugh, just writing Jim. And they were like, BS, it's Jim. So we feel like he kind of, slipped it out a little bit. But sure enough, like 2 weeks later in St. Louis, we get like this big Zoom like meeting or whatever, this conference call. It was Coach Harbaugh, right? And, he's introducing himself. And it was like, he literally set the tone. That was literally our first meeting, like via telephone, right? Set the tone, like there's no BS, nothing. We come in that next winter semester. He's there in like December or something. He has the whole team ranked from best player to worst player.
Wow.
And we were like, oh yeah, no, this is real. This is real. So that winter semester, just to say the least, was, it was tough. It was tough, man. And I think really what coach wanted to do was, really just, come in, just not being a hard ass, right? But, you just really, you can't let like things that, kind of flew before, he had to shut that stuff down, right? So he came in, pretty strict, but he was very fair, right? He was very fair, and he kind of let the guys who wanted to lead and who wanted to win kind of step up. And he let the guys who, were just okay with being mediocre and losing Michigan State here and there, he kind of let them funnel their way out. And, it's really not all too different, from what you see when you have these big program, turnovers. But except with us, I think what was pretty cool is we actually had a lot of guys that wanted to win, that wanted to beat State, that wanted to beat Ohio, that wanted to set the tone and, for future generations of Michigan football to come, right? So when Coach Harbaugh was in there, man, like I'm telling you that the first like few months was just obviously really getting adjusted to coach in his style. But ultimately, man, like he really set precedents of like, look, like all this other BS we were doing is not going to fly. Like the expectation is this, and literally, everything, no offense, but everything is, geared towards beating Ohio. And, obviously if we're good enough to beat Ohio, we feel like we're good enough to beat State, so that's just the Michigan mentality, Yeah. But yeah, so I think that gives that a little bit of insight of like how like tough he came in on us when he first got there.
I love to hear like where were you? Do you remember where you were on the list?
Oh man, I'm gonna just say in between like 40 and 60 when he first got there.
And then of course you probably were motivated to not be between 40 and 60. I mean, I love the tech.
Yeah, no, I finished at like I think I was the MVP that year, so I finished at like 1. But the thing is, man, like
pretty good.
Just like the grind though, man, is like I think that was like one of my favorite like just college experiences. Period. Right? Like looking back on it, man, like. It really challenged me personally to grow. And I think a lot of guys grew in between that January to like August, right? Like where we had, winter ball, spring ball, summer, 7-on-7s, like a lot of guys like matured, like not just as like football players, but like as men, And so I think that's one of the biggest things that like Coach Harbaugh has left, not only just me, but a lot of guys that, came through the program around that time. He's a different guy now though. He's not, I will say he's settled down a little bit. He's not as, he's still strict. He's still himself, but like that menacing, like that fear. Whew,
so now he was dealing with NFL players, and all of a sudden he has to come down and deal with college
players. Are getting off easy.
Yeah.
Jehu had one of the best 6-game stretches as a wide receiver in the history of Michigan football. He caught 9 touchdowns. And I don't have his exact numbers, but it was like it was like 650 yards over 6 games to finish out his junior season, and a couple and beat Florida in the bowl game, and he had 2 against Minnesota. He had 4 touchdowns and 10 catches against Indiana as a junior. And then he had a really good senior season too, when Michigan was one of the top 2 teams in the country. And so Jehu, so 2015, I mean, you guys are doing everything you're supposed to do, and then you're actually beating Michigan State. And Justin likes this game a lot more than I do, and but they beat you right at the end. Right at the end. And so I don't want to focus on that one. What I want to focus in on is how did that game. Hey, he's a Michigan guy. We treated Lewerke with kid gloves.
I just had one question.
Sure, ask your question. If it's
shoot.
All I want to know is what did you do? Because I was in the press box. I'll tell you what I did. I'm in the press box. They're about to punt the football.
No, he doesn't care what you did.
And I'm standing up and I'm like relegating for the loss. And as it happens, my hands are going up to my head and I'm like, oh my God. And
I think Jehu was on the field.
I know. All I want to know is obviously 400 things had to happen in that moment. The ball had to just happen to fall into Watts Jackson's hands and a million different things.
Yeah. And Jake Butt literally one more yard,
right.
And he's tackled at the 1 yard
and
line.
It's over. And the game's over. My point is in that moment, nobody knew what to do. But I want to know from a player who played in the game, who saw it kind of unfold right in front of them, and what was going on? What were you? What did you do?
No. So what I was saying was you got to kind of take it a couple series before because we had a chance to kind of seal the deal, but we ended up it was actually a punt before that one. Gave them field position, then you turn the field over, and then obviously we weren't able to get the first down. I think I got Jake missed me on like a seam route or something. Ended up having to punt, and in that situation, right, they're going to come after the ball, right? They're going to, harass your snapper, harass your PP, harass your punter, right? And the game's almost over, so that's what's going to come, and you just kind of got to be stout in there. Now, I hate talking about what could have been, what should have been, or whatever, but there are certain things that people don't look at as far as how the snapper is treated. And we feel like in that evening, I saw it immediately. What I was looking at was how they're going to blow up the snapper, right? And so, because there's certain ways you can't hit the snapper when his head's down or exposed, and all of that went out the window. And I guess it was a good no call or whatever you want to call it, but they just let us play because that's just what you do. You let Michigan and State play. Bad no call. You let us play, but that one I kind of wish they called. I'm really not. I don't really let. The game being in the hands of the referees, I just like it being in my hands or, my teammates' hands. But literally on the sideline, I was like, what in the heck? I didn't say heck, obviously, I was going to throw him. But I was like, what is going on? And it was just a shock, right? And we were just kind of, just standing there damn, man. And, that one stung. That one stung a lot because, we had a nice little roll going. And, and when you play State, man, I always say this, one of my roommates in college, Bo Deaver, he's actually dating a Spartan girl now. And I always tell her this, right? Because, I got to get along with her. She might be, my sister-in-law in the future. So I got to get along with her. But I always tell her, I said, look, Michigan State bothers me so much just because of the dirt they do during the game, man. From pulling your leg hairs at you're down, twisting your ankle a little bit, kind of getting up and kind of pulling your face mask, dude. And I'm generally a nice guy, and so I have to go into places where I really don't like when I play Michigan State, because I'm really not a jerk,
So,
but they bring it out of me.
But you guys, no Wolverines ever gave it back that way?
Look, we just gave back what was deserved, and I mean,
this rivalry is fantastic, dude. It's so good.
We
it's
had
so
some
good.
guys on our team. Literally, we had some guys on our team, they were don't F with me type of attitude. I know Joe Bolden was one of those guys, hard nosed, you would not do anything to Joe Bolden. We had James Ross, aka Biggs, Jared Wilson, those dudes were they were headhunters, so
So don't pull their leg hair.
I'm not gonna do that.
Don't do that. Don't do that to those guys.
Jay's trying to reach up and grab the nose hair, and he's like, "I'm trying to pull this guy's nose hair out." There's nothing worse than getting your nose hair pulled out.
I'll start crying immediately.
Yeah. So Jehu, so let me ask you this, because the next year, so your 2016, you guys, you essentially won 30-17. They scored with 1 second to go, and Jabril then returns the 2-point conversion. All the way down the field and the whole thing. So, I mean, you guys, had a pretty comfortable victory, but they were similar to this year. They were a bad football team. It was the 3-9 football year, but because you were so motivated, they were down. They were down as a program, right? But I imagine similar to this year, you don't care. No mercy, right? You had your own motivation. You're not looking and going well, they're a 2-6 football team at this time. you probably went in that 2016 game like, we are going to punish the hell out of these guys because that's what they deserve right now.
No. So at the end of the day, right, a rivalry is about at the core of a rivalry, right? It's like, in order for something to be a rivalry, there has to be obviously, mutual feelings of distaste and really deeper than that of like respect, right? Because Michigan State makes us want to be better, right? And we make them want to be better, right? And so regardless how crappy any team is, on any given day, your rival can kick your ass. Literally, you can be the number one team in the country. It's happened. It's happened countless times. You be the number one team in the country. Their team is unranked, but for whatever reason, because you got to understand, like in the off season, literally everything we do, literally break down the huddle. We say beat State. We say beat Ohio. We say these things, right? And it's literally conditioned in our minds that no matter what happens, look, no offense to no Illinois or whatever team, but like it's not that same type of conditions, I should say. I don't want to say respect because we respect all, right? But we fear none. But the thing is, when you play, your rival, right? Like literally that is the game you've been preparing like your whole career for. Every time you go in the weight room, you break down, you say beat State, you say beat Ohio. Every single time, you have a bad practice, you're like, oh man, like we would have gotten beat by State today if we played like this, right? So it doesn't matter. Look, I don't even look at the records because all of a sudden, those corners that all of a sudden couldn't play cover one and were trash. Now they got their hands in your face all of a sudden, putting their hands in your chest, keeping you at the line of scrimmage. And all of a sudden you're like, dang, on film, all they did was, 2-man or whatever. And like, they had me a little outside shade, but then all of a sudden now they want to get balls in, play cover zero, and then really try to strap me up. So it's like, you really got to let all that like leave your mind. And this team, I don't care what the record is, like anybody can get this working, especially them this weekend,
Jehu, I got to ask you this because it sounds like you're on our team with this. The rival, when both teams are better, it's a better rivalry. Like, I mean, it's always going to be no matter 100%. What the record. But like, I feel like you're kind of saying what Michael and I both kind of been lockstep. Like, we want 2021. We want top 10 matchups every year. Like, that's what really gets my blood boiling. And I'm sure as a player, like Michigan, these Michigan players know that they have to win to get their higher goals. And it's a little bit less resistance, even though, to your point, throw the records out. You're not rooting for Michigan State. I'm not trying to make you say that, but at the same time, like you want these programs to be.
Yeah, no. Powerhouses.
Yeah.
Because really, at the end of the day, for me as a Michigan man, right? Like I look at this game and I'm like, look, like we got to have it. We got to have it. Obviously, internal bragging rights, all that stuff. You got to have it. And it's one of these games where like there's so much tradition and history and culture and you just gotta have this one, like nobody's gonna, like, obviously you don't want to lose to anybody, right? But like you just can't lose to your rivals, like and that's just kind of what this game's about. And I want to see Michigan State do well when coming into playoffs, right? Just because, like, and Taylor Lewan said this earlier this week, right? It's like any hope that your rival can kind of build up for themselves and whatever they need to tell themselves to get them psyched to try to give you your best, because as a competitor, guys, like this is really all we want, right? Like what more could you ask for as a competitor, right? Like you want your opponent to be as good as possible. So there's no doubt when you kick that ass, excuse my language, when you kick that ass, there's no doubt that, look, we were better than you that year, and that's all it was, and you guys were the best you could be and we still beat you, right? There's no like, oh man, like, because now, let's say we beat them, right? Then they'll say, oh no, they're having an off year, blah, 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 right? Like when they beat us in 2015, they're not saying, oh no, Michigan, oh man, we can't say we had an off year. We had a pretty good season, like we didn't accomplish our main goals, but now it's like, you beat State this year, like, oh man, like we had an off year, we were rebuilding, we had all this, extracurricular activities off the field with all this other stuff, like we weren't focused. There's so many rooms for excuse. So that's why I love my opponents being like undefeated, especially rivals when we play them. You know what I mean?
I love what Jay was saying, because here's one of the things I've always disagreed with, and then we'll let Jehu off with our last question is, I've heard people say like, oh, well, Mark D'Antonio had all of his success when it was the Rich Rod and Brady Hoke era. And I'm like, well, does it not count when Michigan State was down? Like, look, you beat the opponent that's in front of you. And what Jehu was saying is that no matter what the record of Michigan State is, no matter what the record of Michigan is that week, there is a focus in practice. There's a focus on game day that you're going to play your best football. And so with Jehu, with that in mind, what are you expecting in the game on Saturday at Spartan Stadium under the lights? The first time in the history of the rivalry that game is being played at night in Spartan Stadium. They're going to wear all black uniforms. Yes, they're not in a great position right now. They're 2-4, but what are you expecting from the Spartans and what are you expecting from the Wolverines on Saturday night?
So first of all, I mean, I think State's going to come out, obviously everybody is going to be, hyped, right? Like you already know that. The first night game, like you can't not be excited for this game. Like you guys probably wouldn't be able to sleep the night before, and the thing is, it's tricky because it's a night game. So you're so excited to play in this type of game that you're like, oh crap, no, I actually need to sleep, get some rest. Cause when that second, third, fourth quarter starts coming around, like I need that, that sleep from the night before. But really what it is though, I think State's going to come out, hot, right? I think they're going to come out, pissed off, like, a chip on their shoulder, as they should. And I think Michigan's going to come out, and we really need to manage our emotions, and we need to manage the environment, because I think, especially offensively, the stadium, is because obviously all games start at 0-0, and right. And if it's 0-0, Sparty fans are going to be, they're going to be hyped, so that first third down we get when it's 0-0, JJ's going to be under the center or whatever it is, or in gun. Like, we're going to have to really communicate, and we're going to have to, put our guys in position to succeed. And I really do think the coaching staff does an excellent job of that, because what I just described is indeed all hype, and it literally should have no effect on how we run the ball, no effect on how we throw the ball, right? But you and I both know, right? We all know, as players and former players, right? Like there is a level of edge that, the home team has, just because of the, crowd control, the noise and stuff like that. So we're going to have to be good in our silent counts. But I expect State to come out, fiery hot in terms of their hype levels. But I expect Michigan to come out and just manage themselves and manage them and, do what we got to do to get the dub.
Score prediction?
Score prediction, you got one?
24 and a half
Not
point. Not a big fan of score predictions.
24 and a half point favorites.
Is that what the spread
That's
is?
the spread. So
24 and a half point?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll put you this. If you don't want to do a score, will Michigan cover the spread? Now, let me give you, Brian Lewerke told us earlier, Michigan has not beaten Michigan State in Spartan Stadium by more than 14 points
in the last 25 years.
In the last 25 years. And they've been heavy.
Is that what it is?
Yeah. Like it was 1991 was like the one time, and then there was 1988 or 86 when they blew the doors off them. But
I mean, see, that's what the rivalry games are, like it's tough for always there. Because look, like, they may be having a down year or whatever you want to call it, but I think, man, like, I think we'll cover, man, but I really do. In my book, man, like literally all that matters is the dub, but as far as like score, I think I want to take it a step further, right? I think what you're going to look at is just the wear and tear that I think our O-line, our D-line, our backers, right? And how physical, like I think the more dominant physical team is going to win this game, because there may be some big plays, here and there that, each team makes, but I really do think it's going to be grinded out in the trenches like it always is, right? And so I think whoever's able to get those heavy hands, the receivers blocking, whatever it is, right? Like how we pass protect and how we set that attitude. I think you'll definitely see early in the game, like, okay, well, I can kind of get a vibe of which way this game's going to go. And I think from that standpoint, it could go either way, right? Because both teams are going to, try to have heavy paws and, and really try to be more physical than the other.
But you're taking Michigan.
I think he's taking them to cover 25.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. Okay.
Always.
All right, Jehu, thank you very much, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Guys.
Yeah. And
awesome. I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to now bring in former Michigan State starting quarterback for multiple games in the rivalry game, Brian Lewerke. Brian, first, before we get into the game, I got to ask you this, because I've always wanted to ask somebody that I've covered this. Was I a good media guy to you guys?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I want to know.
Ego of this guy.
I want to know.
That's how you start the podcast.
That's how I want to know. I want to know if I walked in there, he was like, yeah, this guy's a joke, or hey, we like that guy.
To be honest,
Brian, later
there
on,
weren't really a lot of guys where it's like, oh man, I can't stand this guy. There wasn't really anyone like that.
Okay.
I feel like everyone was solid. No one really was that rubbed me the wrong way. So you definitely did not. You were good.
All right, we can move on with our lives now, Michael. Are you ready to? I
I'm
needed
that Billy
for
Madison line. Like, I feel dumber for having been part of this moment.
that works for me. That works for me.
Okay.
All right. So obviously, you know, the ramp up to the rivalry is here. Coach D'Antonio did such a good job of actually making this rivalry, you know, kind of swing back to Michigan State. And you obviously were a part of that when you were a freshman and a sophomore. So take us through kind of like what inside the room was like leading up to this week and motivation. And I guess how much did you guys talk about just this rivalry throughout the week?
A bunch. And I mean, it's a rivalry you talk about for basically the entire year. When we're in the off season, we have like a little sign in our thing that says blah, blah days till Michigan, like counts on days and hours. And then once we get into the season, it goes like week by week. So it'll start each week with the opponent we're playing that week. But in the off season, we're always counting down to the Michigan game. We're always trying to do one more rep in the weight room for Michigan. And it's something that, you know, I was from the West Coast, so I wasn't very familiar with the rivalry here at all. But once you get there, like the first time you play against them, even if, you know, my first game, I was redshirted, so I wasn't even playing, but like, you know, just how intense it gets and how serious it gets.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, you started 3 games against Michigan from 2017 to 19. And, you know, I have good memories, and I also have some memories of you beating Michigan there. So
I have great memories.
Yeah. What was it like when, because 2016 you got in as a late in the game, 2017 was your show. So what was it like for you in 2017? And that was the rain game. I mean, it poured. And you guys, I think you were a pretty big underdog in that one and were able to come out on top. So take us through the memories of the week leading up to that, and then the day of, and obviously the big victory over Michigan in 2017.
Yeah. I mean, I don't remember too much about the week leading up. I mean, I do remember we were unranked and they were number 7 or 8 at the time, I think. And it was the first night game in the rivalry history. And it was my first start playing at Michigan. And I remember throughout the week a little bit hearing about the rain that was going to be coming on Saturday and trying to get out in front early and be able to score some points, because I knew that we were not going to be able to do much in the second half. With all the rain, it was going to be tough just to get the ball snapped and handed off. So we tried to get out hot and early, ended up working, had a couple touchdowns. That's still my favorite play in my career to this day, that first touchdown we scored against them where I ran it in. So it was a lot of fun, man. That was probably my favorite game while I was at State.
So you're standing, I think it was like you're inside the 15-yard line. Was it a called QB draw run, or was it?
No.
You just saw it kind of open and it just.
Yeah, I saw it was man coverage, and Michigan ran a lot of man back in the day. So I saw it was man coverage, and no one really had me. I think the backer, he might have been spying, I can't remember, or he might have had the running back in man coverage. But I saw he went kind of the other way, and I just went through my reads, saw the gap open, I just freaking took it and ran in. So
do you still think about the chills that you get from like when you dove in? It was kind of one of those things where you got in and it was like, okay, this is a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of blacked out when I scored a touchdown. Like I got up, my helmet was like up on my nose, and I'm just like looking around. Everyone's like pulling my helmet down, slapping me in the head. I didn't really do a celebration because I didn't really I was like kind of shocked.
Yeah.
I kind of got whacked in the hip there too. I think someone put their helmet right into my hip, and it's kind of bugging me for a couple weeks after that, but it was definitely worth it.
Yeah, definitely. And that was the famed. Who was the DB that did that to McDoom when he dropped that pass?
That was Lane.
Lane.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. That was.
I kind of blocked that whole game out from my memory. I don't really have.
So funny thing. I have a towel left by one Shea Patterson that was left on the turf when I was out there doing interviews and stuff after the game. And I'll give you one of these because I want you to talk about, you know, what's next for Michigan State coaching wise and stuff, and trying to find a guy like D'Antonio. But he and I had a pretty good relationship because we did a lot of like interviews and whatnot. But I remember after that game being down on the field at Michigan Stadium, and he kind of jogged by me and he kind of, I'm going to do it. He kind of looked back at me and went, and then he went on his way. Like, I mean, it was, I don't think anyone ever saw it. It was just a thing between me and D'Antonio, and it was awesome.
That's
How
funny.
much did he love coming into the locker room after a game like that and just being like,
Yeah, I mean, like that's him. It's just like that's just his personality. He's a funny dude, and he's like so like bipolar. Sometimes he would be like really happy, and then he could snap at you real quick. But most of the time he was pretty mellow, and he definitely liked beating Michigan, especially at their place. And we always loved doing it for him too.
It is so like this is what is great about this rivalry is, here's Brian talking. Oh no, Mark was a nice guy, and you ask any Michigan fan, they're like that smug, arrogant asshole, right? Like that's how they would describe him. What is that guy? He's always got a scowl on his face, and like, what's wrong with that dude, right? Like that's their their impression of Mark D'Antonio is this guy that's just always walking around with like, just perpetually pissed off, but that is. Brian, I mean, in my lifetime, and Justin and I talked about it in an earlier podcast, like that is what was necessary on the Michigan State side to be able to flip this rivalry. Because when he came in 2007, I think Michigan had won, 6 in a row?
Something like that, yeah.
And it was the Mike Hart little brother and all this different stuff. Like, you needed someone like Mark D'Antonio that essentially walked into that locker room, and you know better than I would, but instead, like, enough of this, shit. Like, we're done. Like, we're not getting bullied anymore. We're going to be the bully. I wonder what. I mean, you weren't there at the beginning, but I wonder what it was like that culture that was passed on to you from that generation before you that really did flip the rivalry.
Yeah, I mean, he made it personal, and I think that was what was kind of needed in the rivalry. He kind of embraced the underdog mentality and carried it throughout his entire tenure there, and definitely instilled it into all the guys. And I can see what you mean. I mean, like if I was on the other side, I probably wouldn't like Coach D as an outsider looking in. But obviously, like I'm a Michigan State guy. I played for him. I freaking love him. And I mean, it's probably the same for us with Harbaugh as well. Like looking on the outside, I'm not really a big fan of him. So. But yeah, I mean, we always embraced that underdog mentality, and we loved every chance we had to embrace it.
So switching gears to this year, not really going the way that we would have liked potentially. Do you like the black uniforms though? I know they're going to rock those. Those are kind of slick.
I do. They're better than the neons that we had. So
you had to walk out there. Did you feel like a cartoon character? Because I feel like you guys looked like a bunch of cartoon characters.
Yeah. It was just too much going on. You had the white, you had the neon, you had the dark green. It was just too much. But I'm very excited to see the black. It's our first like black uniform in history,
ever, right? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the pro combats from like the early 2010s, I think William Golston's, time at Michigan State, they wore those, but those were like dark green and the bold or the bronze and whatnot. Did you guys wear that helmet once? Didn't you guys wear that combat helmet once?
In 2015, I think we might have one time, or maybe in 16 as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the old school one. It was kind of like a new rendition one.
Let me ask you this, Brian, because this week, I mean, it's you have prominent Michigan State members of the media who are expecting a blowout on Saturday night. It's when you guys in 2017, I think you were a 14-point dog, maybe. And at that time, it was like the biggest in the rivalry. Like they're a 25-point underdog. So take me into the mentality of the Michigan State locker room this week. They just changed quarterbacks, so that does provide a little bit of energy and some spark in the whole thing. But how do you I mean, the rest of us may think it's a pipe dream, but like, how do you go into it and say we're going to shock the world? Like, what is the mentality, the attitude of a Michigan State Spartan as they're getting ready for the first night Michigan game in Spartan Stadium history?
I think if you need the coaches to motivate you for this game, then you are in the wrong place, because this is the first night game at Spartan Stadium. You're wearing the first uniforms in the history of Michigan State, first black uniforms, and it's Michigan week. And I know, Coach HB has been through it a bunch. He knows everything about the rivalry. And I'm sure he's going to get him fired up, but these guys are going to be able to motivate themselves. And I think it kind of gets thrown around a lot. You kind of throw the rivalry or the record out the window when it comes to this rivalry, but I think it is very true. Anything can happen and emotions are running high. So
what's the recipe? What do they got to do? You've watched this team. You've watched probably a little bit of Michigan as well. I know you have your own podcast. You are the podcast with a couple other. You are the program. You are not the program. You are the podcast, but you also are the program.
Yes.
But you've watched both these teams probably enough, and you've seen Michigan's strengths, you've seen Michigan State's strengths and weaknesses. Like, what has to happen? What's the ideal scenario for Michigan State to pull it off?
I think I mentioned this in my podcast as well. I think Michigan obviously doesn't start out hot. They're kind of they have a slow death to teams that they'll make you think you have a chance in the first quarter and then win by 40. So I think if we can keep it close within 10 to 14 by halftime, obviously, or leading, that'd be great. But and then winning the third quarter, I think if you're on defense, getting a 3-and-out or at least a stop on stopping their offense, and if you are on offense trying to get a score, at least a field goal or a touchdown to start the third quarter, and just kind of switch the momentum quickly in the second half, I think would be really big for us.
Brian, to that point, and I've talked to so many players before, and when you're the favorite, if there is like a certain expectation, and I will say one of the things I've been impressed with Michigan the last couple of games is their Minnesota game. I think it was maybe 10-3 after the first quarter. Indiana, they're down 7-0. And you can, a lot of times, if you put that negative energy, the anxiety on the favorite, like, oh, why are you not rolling over this team? And I've been impressed that Michigan has not reacted that way. I mean, like, we're just going to keep going out there and doing what we're doing, and then boom, blow the doors off of them. But in this rivalry, to your point, if Michigan State were to either get up or be close at the half or something like that, do you sense that there could be Michigan, like, why are we not rolling these guys? We've been told all week we're supposed to beat these guys. Like, how does that shift the way that you go out there and execute?
Yeah, I think Michigan has done a very impressive job of being able to stay focused throughout the last couple of weeks in their games and being able to blow out teams that they should. But I think that is a great point. This is a rivalry that can be emotional, and that could maybe get in their heads a little bit, hopefully, if it's a close game at halftime, and maybe some mistakes are made on the Michigan side, and hopefully the Spartans can take advantage.
All right, we're gonna have to ask you. We're gonna throw our predictions out later on in the pod. So, what do you think? What are you gonna call it? You gonna go homerism? You gonna go realistic? What are you gonna do? Shake us up.
No, I'm going homerism.
Good boy.
If we're looking at a Michigan State win, I don't think it's gonna be terribly high scoring. So I'll say like 24-21 MSU.
Okay. Hey, I probably won't say that, but I'm glad you did.
Yeah, I'm not going to say Michigan's going to win. I can tell you that.
I just wish I would have been able to stand on the sidelines in a uniform just once to feel like I actually was a part of the program. I'm not, and I didn't. So
did you ever? And what is the Spartan tradition? It's coming out of the tunnel. Is it on the north side of the stadium?
We only have one tunnel,
yes.
Okay.
But we don't fight people in ours, anyways.
Well, I mean, you fought people in
Continuing.
ours, so.
Continuing.
Yeah, so you come out of there, and I think D'Antonio doesn't he lock the arms? Is that what he runs out in the whole thing? So, you have the mentality, and when you come out of the Michigan, because I mean the game you won in 2017, like you're coming out of that Michigan tunnel after they've run through. Yeah, I've got to imagine that there's no better feeling than just being a football player and coming out in the stadium, man. Like that's the one thing as a member of the media, you never. Like, how many times you've been down on the field? I've been down on the field for the ends of so many great Michigan victories, but you're never like coming out with the team, right? I mean, that's what every fan listening to this podcast, every fan out there is like, what does it feel like just to come out there? And what does it feel like to go up the tunnel after you just pulled the big victory?
Yeah, I mean, we've had some pretty good victories in some good places. When we played Penn State, we played at their place.
Felton
played
Davis.
at Michigan, got a victory. Never got a win at Ohio State, but when you first run out and you see, especially like the night games, and you see the crowd and how them booing you and all that, you love that. And when you're at home, everyone's cheering you on. It's a lot of fun, and especially when you win at the end and you're able to run back up the tunnel as quick as you can, get back in the locker room, sing the fight song. It's a lot of fun.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for your time today. You Are the Program is a podcast out there. If you want to give him a follow, that would be awesome. Thank you for your time, and go green, brother. I'm with you.
Yes, sir.
Let's
Go white.
Let's shock the world.
Thanks, Brian.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
One of the things, looking at those two interviews that I love, both guys were talking about was just the mentality this week, and it's really how the show opens. Our show. The thing is that let me start again, Mark. Ready? 3, 3, 2, 1. Justin, what I love about those two interviews, both guys kind of talked about the mentality going into Saturday night's game and how it's really how even our opening for the podcast, throw out the records, right? You got to prove it on that particular day. And Lewerke saying, hey, we're gonna have a mentality this weekend. We know that we're the underdog, but we're gonna be dialed in. And Jehu admitting that he saw that film. He's watching film in 2016 of a bad Michigan State team, and yet he shows up on the field on Saturday, and he's like, how are these guys playing me tougher? Why are these guys stronger? So that, like, he's expecting a closer game. Lewerke's expecting a closer game. Stranger things could happen. I know it's a 24.5-point favorite, but this could be a tighter game than people are thinking on Saturday night.
It could be. And the thing is this is every single year, especially when Michigan's maybe the more dominant team going into this game. And there's been years when Michigan State's been, and I've been way more like, pumping my chest about Michigan State's chances in it. But every time, and I bet you could agree with this, every time your team's been the dog in this game, the closer you get to game day, don't you start to believe a little bit more?
You do.
I have no reason.
And that was during the Rich Rod and Brady Hoke era that I was even believing.
I don't even have a head football coach, and I think Michigan State can win this game. So that's where, now, the stars are going to have to align. I think Michigan is going to boa constrictor the hell out of Michigan State. I think this will, maybe Michigan State, and they've done it before in the past where they've come out, they've had a nice scripted series, they go down, they score the first game, or points of the game. Maybe they get Michigan to have to punt the football, go down, make it a 10-0 lead. This is one of those games where till there's 4 minutes left in the game and Michigan State has a 2-touchdown lead or a 2-possession lead, am I going to think they're safe to win this game? It's going to take it's going to take 55 minutes of gameplay for me to actually think they can pull it off. Because it's going to have to get to that point at the end of the game where there's just not enough time left. Whatever's the scenarios are going on.
Well, it's a little bit, if you watch the Lions-Tampa Bay game from last week, it was, as a Lions fan, I kept on thinking, like, is Tampa going to make the run? Is Tampa going to make the run? And there was like 7 minutes to go, and then there was like 4 minutes to go. And like 4 minutes to go, you're like, they just don't have enough time. Like, even if they score, they're going to have to try to get an onside kick. They don't have any timeouts left. Like, all right, the Lions got this in the bag, right? And like, that was a good feeling with about 4 minutes to go. I'm hoping as a Michigan fan, I'm expecting it to be more than 4 minutes to go. It would be great for my nerves, my energy, if it's like the whole fourth quarter. I'm like, all right, we're up by, 24 points or 28 points or something like that. That has been the talk this week. But as we get closer and closer to the game, I'm not going the other way where I'm saying like, oh, they're going to lose, but I'm going a little bit like, I think I'm not expecting 52-7. I'm not expecting 49-3. No. But before we get to the predictions for our team, our game, there is one massive college football game this weekend. Top 5 matchup. Ohio State hosting Penn State. Whoever wins this game suddenly is the co-favorite with Michigan to win the Big Ten. And it kind of, whoever wins this game, then the game against Michigan, whether it's November 11th against Penn State or November 25th against Ohio State, becomes that next game on the schedule that everybody's looking to, where this probably decides who wins the Big Ten East. So who do you got? I think the Buckeyes are favored by 4.5.
I think I got Penn State. I've just seen too many chinks in the armor of Ohio State so far this year. And while Penn State hasn't necessarily, their offense and their defense are playing at such a high level that I haven't seen as many stalls as I've seen Ohio State have, if that makes sense. Now, who knows, right? It's at the Shoe. Now, it helps that it's a day game instead of a night game. If that was a night game, I would certainly give Ohio State more of an advantage. Same way that Michigan going to Penn State this year at noon is like, Penn State could have a night game. Like, what a significant advantage that would have been. But I truly, truly believe that Penn State and Michigan on November 11th is going to determine the Big Ten. I think Ohio State's they're breaking in a new quarterback. They're running it. Their injuries. They're just not that same Ohio State team that we've seen in the past
for the last.
And I think that it's finally Penn State's turn to sit at the big boy table and actually stay there for a minute.
Okay.
What about you?
You're taking Penn State?
I'm taking Penn State to cover.
Yeah, I mean,
for sure.
The last time James Franklin beat the Buckeyes, I believe, was 2016, and it's when Penn State ended up going to the Big Ten title game and won the Big Ten title. He got a lot of runway from that. I mean, that was the year that they actually got smoked by Michigan, but he won a Big Ten title. He beat Wisconsin, I believe, and since then he's kind of been, last year he had a nice bowl victory, but he's been really, relying on that early success in his career to build his reputation. And so, yeah, it's time for them to beat the Buckeyes. If they
Yep.
don't beat the Buckeyes and they lose to Michigan, then he's essentially going to be what he is, which is a 10-win team that can't beat the big dogs.
Yep.
I think they're going to get it done. I really like Drew Aller, the quarterback for Penn State. I like him more than Kyle McCord.
Yep.
The Penn State defense is absolutely legit. I think they're going to have more success than the Buckeyes will. I'm going to take Penn State by I'll take them by 6 points.
Okay.
6 points in this one.
So
that
two
will-
Penn State victories.
Two Penn State victories.
And then, so before I give you my prediction, I gotta give a shout out for my hat. Now,
It's a great hat.
if you remember these hats, if you're a millennial or an early millennial like me, these were the rage
They were,
back in
man.
the day. They could
Yeah.
put like Spartans or Wolverines, and if you have one of these, this belonged to my grandfather, my dad's dad, who went to Michigan.
Wow.
He started the Michigan State Rose family tradition back when it was still like the MSC. Like before, or the
Wow.
MAC, like they were the Michigan Agricultural College from upstate New York. So shouts to Jim. And because I'm wearing Jim's hat today, I think Michigan State
Don't do it.
only loses
Okay.
by 10.
Okay.
I think it's a closer game than maybe I would have thought earlier in the year. Like I said, I went back and I kind of thought about some of my comments about how I want them to win like 100-0 so it never happens again. Part of that still rings true. But at the same time, I can't actually believe that Michigan State is as bad. And we've talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers, Michigan State has lost 4 football games this year, but they were in all of them numbers-wise. And this is the best opponent they're going to play, Michigan.
Mhm.
Michigan is Michigan State is Michigan's best opposition to this point. I don't think Michigan State's got enough to beat them, but I certainly think they have enough to stick around and make this somewhat compelling.
Okay.
For a while.
Okay.
For a while could be 5 minutes. It could be 50 minutes. For a while.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've used a lot of big words this week: bludgeoning, massacre, manslaughter, all those different things. And maybe that'll come to fruition. And as a Michigan fan, I would love it if, again, I'm going in the fourth quarter and the score is 42-3. And and my wife's probably gone to bed at this time because she's not wanting to watch this. And I get my proverbial congratulations from my father-in-law, like, you guys played really well. That would be great. As we get closer and closer to the game, I have been around this rivalry for 43 years. I know how it starts to eat at you, and they are going to play their best football game. So I'm not going to go with the massive blowout.
Okay.
I'm going to predict 38-17, a 21-point victory, which doesn't cover the spread, but would still be a very satisfying victory. And I think that Michigan will be up enough by the time we get to like the 7 or 8 minute mark of the fourth quarter, where Michigan State's going to somehow pull some rabbit out of the hat and pull this off. Like, I'm going to feel with about 7 to 8 minutes to go in the game, I'm going to like, this one's in the bag. I can have my glass of bourbon and just enjoy myself.
I will be at a wedding. Shouts to
Wow, who the hell did that to you?
a Michigan fan, actually, and a Michigan State grad are getting married this weekend. Up in
Perfect
Sutton's Bay.
combination.
Yes, so
Yeah.
I will be handing them the "I Love You, But You're an Idiot" podcast to listen to as they get ready for their nuptials later on Saturday afternoon. So we won't really be locked into the game. I'm sure I'll probably rewind it unless it was a horrible defeat. I probably won't go back and watch it, but it's going to be fun, man. And you know what? Have fun this weekend, guys.
Yeah.
If you're going to the game, have
Tailgate
a good
your butts
time.
off.
Tailgate your butts off for us. Have a drink for us. Go up and introduce yourself to another group. Again, I'm really galvanized by that article that the M Live put out. And like, it is so true. Like, we don't have to always agree on everything when it comes to this rivalry, but God damn it, it's fun. I'm having a great this whole week. I've just felt like better than I have in years past. It just, even when other media pundits are bringing up like the tunnel and stuff, it didn't seem to have as much like hatred and venom as it had in the years past. Maybe it's because Michigan State's just not very good right now, record-wise, or what? Or Michigan's got bigger things. Whatever, that's fine. But man, I am truly enjoying the rivalry week this week, even though it's been a little bit more downplayed. But hey, we still got time.
Well, and I will be, as a Michigan fan, after this week, I will be rooting for Michigan State to pull off the next 2 victories. I think it's Minnesota and Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And have some success and finish the year 6-6 if possible, and do those type of things. And then I'm gonna be really curious. We're gonna talk a lot more about it, the coaching search.
Sure.
I'm gonna be very curious who they hire, because if they hire the right guy, it's not 5 years down the road. It's 2025 that Michigan State can really, could look at putting something together, challenging Michigan, challenging, the way that the portal works, the way that NIL works. I'm not saying that they're going to be, going toe to toe and even spread in 2025 with Michigan, but they can turn the program around pretty quickly. It used to be you had to give a guy 5 years. Now it's like 2 to 3 years for them to really do what they need to do.
And I'll just put it this way: there's only one consistent in college football, and that is change. Because the world will continue to move. Jim Harbaugh, is he sticking around? Is he leaving? I think he's staying. He should. Why wouldn't he? But my point is, Michigan State will figure it out. And I love what Jehu said. And I hope that there are more players. I know not all players are going to agree with that. This rivalry's better when both teams are playing good.
Yeah,
it's just a fact. I don't care if you don't agree with it. It's fun when both these teams have something online. So good luck this weekend, brother. This is why we did this rivalry podcast in the first place.
We will come back on Monday.
We will. I don't know how happy one or both of us are going to be. It'll be interesting. So
I love you, man.
But you're an idiot.